Welcome to RHI's Sociable City Interviews, where we meet with global thought leaders on nightlife and the social economy. Today we are here with Peter Marks, chairman of REKOM UK, the largest specialist operator of party bars and nightclubs in the UK, and part of the 200 plus businesses based throughout the UK and Nordics. Formerly the Deltic Group, he rescued the business for the second time in 10 years in December 2020 due to the devastating effect on nightclubs of COVID-19 restrictions. He has over 40 years experience in the late night economy and has been in senior management positions of national late night operators since 1995. He is also the representative for the Late Night Group on the board of the UK Hospitality Association and an active member of the Nighttime Industry Association.
Peter, what a great honor to meet a legend in the United Kingdom's nightlife industry. I'm so happy we're able to have this conversation.
Well, listen, it's very nice of you to call me a legend. I don't think that's what I am. I'm just a guy who's worked hard and had a lot of success, but not always success over 42 years. Can you believe it?
Yeah. So tell me about that. 42 years ago, what was the young Peter Marks thinking about doing with their life?
Well, you know, I'd been at university and it was around about 1981. And there was a recession in the UK. And so I kept going for all of these jobs with big companies such as, Legal and General and Marks and Spencer, the retailer, and things like that. And in the end, I got to sort of December. And I thought, I'm going to have to get a job. And there's a job as a manager, a trainee manager, which sounded very grand, in a local nightclub. And so that's how I started. And I suppose I rode on the back of the success of that nightclub, because that nightclub, which was up in Yorkshire, the north of England, ended up being Nightclub of the Year 2 years running, was phenomenally successful. And what I thought was a temporary job to get through the next few months and be able to sort of buy my girlfriend a Christmas present ended up being a career. And here I still am. I can't believe it.
Yeah. Now I understand you've gone on and you've built a little nightclub empire. Can you talk about your venues and how many you have, where they're located, the kind of general theme?
Well, yeah, sure. I am chairman of part of REKOM. REKOM is a North European business, and the UK was acquired during COVID times because actually, unfortunately, my business couldn't survive COVID. It was one of those that just needed more and more cash to keep it going. And so we got new investors. And what we've got now is 40 nightclubs throughout the UK, from Aberdeen in the north through down to Plymouth in the south. And we've got 15 bars as well, including 3 Nordic concepts. So, we've got a width of business, but I think the common theme is that we are about sort of basically the late night economy. We're about parties and having a good time. And I guess the glue that holds all of our businesses together is sort of the later on they go, the sort of the louder and the grander the party. And we play, DJ music in all of those premises.
Mm-hmm. And so I know you mentioned COVID and the lockdown really impacted your business, but from what I read and from, working with Michael Kill too and reading his wonderful reports, he really comments on just not only the lockdown, but the war in the Ukraine, with the impact on energy prices and changes in insurance and staffing shortages. And so how are all of these affecting your business and just generally the whole nighttime economy?
Jim, let's start with COVID. It was tough because we were used as a political football in the late night economy. We always respected the fact that if lockdown was lockdown, that's fair enough. We had to protect people. But when they allowed pubs to open and nightclubs not to, it was a complete farce. We know that the government were trying to do anything that was popular. And of course, there's 60,000 pubs in the UK, and they appeal to a great width of demographic and age. whereas nightclubs was just a small part of the mix, and there's only about 1,000 nightclubs in the UK, and so it didn't matter. They just wanted to sort of keep the youngsters in and make sure they didn't go and party, and it was really tough. And in fact, I was on a board that spoke with members of the of Parliament, with MPs and senior MPs at that, and we tried to get more financial help because of the particular hole that we were in, but we couldn't. And there just wasn't enough money. And this great unfairness where there were schemes like Eat Out to help out, great if you had a food business, sort of low VAT for everybody that opened, except nightclubs because we couldn't, meant that whereas everybody got furlough support, everybody got business rate support, thereafter, if we measured our business in our sector, not just REKOM or Deltic as it was then known, you could say that the average business that was closed got about 12 pence in per pound of turnover help. Those that were designated sort of cultural facilities, including nightclubs like Ministry of Sound in London and Fabric in London, they got about 35 pence in the pound, and we got 4. So it was no surprise that we went under. Then, if we move forward, we then, when we did open, and we called it Freedom Day in the UK, certainly England and Wales, Scotland was a bit different because Scotland had a slightly different, more cautious political agenda, and they just wanted to make sure they were different from London up there in Edinburgh. But we opened and everything went ballistic. We had 12 amazing months, and that got us through to sort of the May, June of 2022, and everyone thought, well, this is great, and we were rebuilding our balance sheets. And for me, our new investors got a great start in the business, and things were going great. And then, well, it couldn't last, could it? What happened then was that we ended up with, I guess, the cost of doing business crisis, energy through the roof. Now, for my company, it didn't affect us, purely luck. We ended up having sort of like 3-year plans with our energy suppliers. But for so many of my friends in the sector, that hasn't been the case, and they really found it tough. There's been labour shortages. A lot of people after COVID decided to find new careers, especially people like security and some of the older people who just decided that they had reinvented their lives during COVID, and so that was tough. Yeah, we had headwinds, and Mike Kill, who's a good friend of mine, highlights those really well. But if that wasn't enough, the third strand to this really then is what we have in the UK, which is a real cost of living crisis. We know that food is running at mega inflation, 15-20% for the basic food inflation. Rents and property mortgages have gone through the roof. We're talking at the moment of those with mortgages having another £500 a month to find in the next year if you've got a fixed rate coming to the end of its term, on average in the UK. But of course, most of my guests are under the age of 23, 24, so they don't have mortgages, but they get affected by the rent headache and of course the energy. So what you've got then is, sort of our young guests with inflation, we think of around about 22%. A lot of them that are students living away from mum and dad, and that's 35% of the whole market. They're running with, as I say, 22% inflation. It's tough. And that meant that a lot of the late night business out in the UK, not just my company, but others in the wider sector, in the, what I would say, post 11 o'clock under 23 market, are once again struggling. And frankly, I've never seen anything like it. But I have seen 8 business cycles, and you sort of always believe it'll come back. That's what you've got to believe.
Yeah. Well, I think that's that purpose and that hope that keeps us going.
Yeah.
This raises a question, because Carly mentioned it yesterday. Carly from Bristol. We were on a harm reduction forum. She mentioned, you had 18-year-olds who were locked down for 18 months, all coming into the market, and they're challenged socially in some ways because of their isolation. So how have you seen the clientele that is coming out? How is it? Is it any different? And what are their drinking patterns or social patterns or their behavior patterns that may have changed because of the lockdown and coming back in? And how about the hours in which they socialized? Are there trends that are shifting the times they go out, or how late they stay out, or how much they spend?
Well, we do something called the REKOM Night Index, and we've been doing this for years, and we research this. Our eyes are telling us that they're coming out less often, but when they go out, they want a really good night out. They don't want to waste their sort of hard-earned cash on just a normal everyday sort of night out. So we get a benefit from that, but when the frequency is low, obviously that's no good for us. Our spend per heads are holding up, but we know that money is tight, and so people are either sort of turning to going out or staying in, but not really down the middle. When it comes to sort of post-COVID behaviour, we've not really seen any major changes. I think it's fair to say in the first 6 months after we opened, we probably had more incidents than normal, mainly petty incidents that you can all imagine. But that was also because we were so busy. So there was no question that that was headwind stuff, but we think that's all pretty much died down. But we're looking at people who maybe used to come every fortnight now coming every month, and those that used to come every week maybe coming every fortnight. So no question that's an element. But there's another interesting subplot here, and that is in the world of students. Now, I was talking to one university last week, and I just asked him how he was doing, and he said it's really tough. The big end of term parties aren't happening. The part of that is because people are actually doing exams from home. I did ask how that works, and I don't think he could give me a satisfactory answer, to be honest. But it beggars belief, that one, doesn't it? But anyway, he said that the big end of term parties just don't exist. People are literally doing exams from home. They're saving money by living back at mum and dad's, and that whole student field is very different than it used to be. So we've got a lot riding on this year, because the students of last year literally have not had an exam in a hall. But of course, normality is changing, and from our point of view, we see that. For students leaving home and going away to university, probably in another city or town, that sort of social aspect is a really important part of their lives of growing up. Even I went to university all those years ago, and my social life was really important. It was almost as important as my studies, and to see that go would be a terrible thing.
Now, earlier we were discussing this evolving role of women, not only as employees and in particular in security, but also as the decision makers and the patrons. So in your experience in the UK, how have you seen the role of women shaping what you do in terms of how you create the social experience? Whether it be in your DJ dance clubs or your bars, where it's a much more intimate setting. How do you see the trends? How many more women are getting involved in management where they could bring their perspective to design and product mix? And then also, I think this whole idea of security with a lot of the issues around sexual harassment and assault and other things that happen, and what role women's security might play. So you've got the patrons, the management, and the security, and the role of women in each of these sectors from your perspective.
Well, let's start with the simplest one of all is security, because in 2016, we made the decision to have at least one, but usually quite a few more, female security fronting our door. In fact, literally at the front with the guys behind them, and they were the ones that then could diffuse anybody's sort of difficult circumstances, should we say. They were the ones that were maybe turning people away. But they were also the people that, if people got into trouble inside or were a little bit nervous or whatever, they would be the people that they would approach the female security staff far more than the male. And I'm not saying that male security staff are bad. They're well trained in the UK. There's quite a high bar. You've got to pass an exam. You've got to go on a course. This is it's a very professionalised industry these days. But female security, absolutely all day long, is so important. And and they've tried to, I guess, they've softened the image of security. Then when it comes to management, I'd love to see more management, female management in our nightclubs. The issue we find is that we can easily find good female management for our bars, because our bars tend to sort of shut at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, but there's a lot more reluctance for them to actually sort of run until sort of 4 o'clock, sometimes 5 o'clock before they get home. And even more disappointing is that actually right now, and I'm almost embarrassed to say this, we don't have a regional manager that is a woman. I keep banging on to my team saying we've got to encourage people through here, because they've just got a different outlook, a different way of managing. It should be part of the mix, and so it's work in progress. And I think that's true of the whole UK. The bars, I think, many of the companies in the UK, have got a lot of women managers. It's not in the slightest bit unusual. Maybe, I don't know what the mix is, 30-40%. But when it comes to nightclubs, it's just a different thing. And then the other point that you touched on, which is quite interesting, I'll throw a few things at you, is that the first thing is that we know that if it's a couple going out, it's usually the female that chooses where to go, and the male just goes along. The second thing is that when it comes to organisation, there's no question which sex is the most organised. We find that when we have large parties of females coming along, or mixed, but it's organised by the female, the booking is done a month in advance. Worst case, 2 weeks. Whereas the guys are on the phone during the day, or emailing, or Facebooking the venue saying, "Have you got anything for tonight?" So I think that's another indicator. And there's another one. You haven't asked me this question, but I'm going to give you an answer to it anyway. And that is, how many these days, how many people really go out to meet a person of the opposite sex? And may I add that I understand that obviously, there's same-sex couples and the whole mix who are our guests. But if I was to say to you, though, that we did some research and we asked how many people go out to meet a partner, particularly of the opposite sex. We had only 8% of women actually went out into the nighttime economy with the potential of meeting the opposite sex, whereas it's 12% of guys.
Well, I think it's also, there are pop songs that say, women, we're going out to dance. We're not going out to meet anybody. And when I did a tour, when we do city projects, we do late night tours. So Alicia, who you met, just started to work with me. She was probably 21 or 22. And she said, "Can I bring some friends?" I said, "Sure." And so we ended up with like 15 women going around to the clubs with me, because I wanted to do it as a research project. And then they would all go and dance and everything. And then we talked about it afterwards, because I would see these guys standing around the edge, and you'd have a group of 5 or 6 really, dynamic women dancing, having a great time. And these guys are just staring, almost like, what do I do? And afterwards, I talked with the women about that. And they said, "Well, we go out to dance with each other. We don't go out to try to dance with the man, So I guess your research supports that.
There's another angle here, and that is that the biggest growth session in the nighttime economy isn't even at night. It's actually Saturday brunch, where premises open with a bottomless brunch, usually serving Prosecco and pizza, is enormously popular. And it's the females that are taking, you know, sort of 70%, 80% of the space up, sometimes more than that. So you can see, you know, you've always got to adapt to the market.
You know, in fact, you heard Philip Colvin. It's taken a few years for him to transition using the term social economy instead of nighttime economy, because I think you're seeing the types of trends that you're talking about, that shift to the live music festivals. So if you used to go out 2 times a week, you know, you go out every 2 weeks, so you could save your money to pay for the big ticket items, you know. And then you have this early evening entertainment that's coming along, because a lot of people just are saying, I don't want to be coming home at 4 or 5 in the morning, you know. So I think that you have to look at the economy as how people socialize, and that the socialization can occur at different times of the day or different days of the week.
Yeah,
and that as an entrepreneur, you have to say, how do I expand my market instead of how do I go back to the market that I had? And if you don't keep up on trends like you do, you're chasing after something that will never come back again. Kind of like you and me hoping that we'll be 25 again. You know, it's just one of those things that will never happen, and we keep trying to chase after it, you know.
Yeah.
But we're at the end of our conversation here, and is there anything that you could predict will change? I know it's very difficult to predict change, but in 5 years, I mean, where do you see this whole, you know, under 25-year-old nightclub scene?
You've always had to adapt. I've never ever seen our market be stable. It really hasn't. And people say to me sometimes, what do you think is going to happen to music? And I said, are you kidding me? Are you really asking that question? Let me tell you, if you look back, you went from Elvis Presley to the Beatles to glam rock to punk to electronic dance music. You know, so all you can do as a nightclub operator is always adapt. Keep an eye on the music trends. From the point of view of how people socialize, you just may have to change your hours. You might end up having to sort of have smaller rooms and smaller clubs rather than big rooms and big clubs sometimes. But it's always been like that. We're completely used to that. You know, when it comes to marketing, we were the first that came up with, you know, proper marketing and good content for social media, way in front of just about every sector. So my view is that as long as we keep really passionate young people at the forefront of our thinking and our management teams, then actually, you know, we're always going to be open to the change. And you know, you're right. I mean, I wouldn't have been doing this for 43 years if I wasn't open to change all the time. It's just life.
Yeah. Well, that's a good conclusion. Well, Peter, this has been so exciting, and I'm sure we could sit around and spend many hours reminiscing about all of the changes and all of the adaptations that have to be made. But I really respect what you're doing, and really honored that you took the time out to meet with me today.
I'm delighted. Thanks a lot, Jim.